He thought he was saving them. He was destroying them. Paul Denton sat at his desk that Tuesday morning, staring at the number on his screen. Negative $4 million. His hands didn't shake. They'd stopped shaking 3 months ago. Now they just felt cold. Outside his window, Mrs. Chen walked past with her grandson. Paul had managed her retirement since 1987. She trusted him with everything, and everything was gone. But let me take you back, because this story, it doesn't start where you think it does. 30 years earlier, Paul was 26 and broke. He'd failed the CPA exam twice. His father told him he'd never amount to anything. His girlfriend left him for a lawyer. Paul was working night shifts at a gas station when Mr. Raymond walked in at 2 a.m. Raymond was drunk, crying, holding a crumpled envelope. "My accountant stole from me," he sobbed. 20 years of savings, gone. Paul drove him home that night, sat with him until dawn, and made a promise. "I'll never let that happen to anyone. Not ever." That promise became Paul's entire identity. He passed the exam on his third try, started his firm in 1985 with 3 clients and a borrowed desk, worked 16-hour days, never missed a deadline, never overcharged a penny. When the Johnsons lost their house in a fire, Paul restructured their accounts for free and found them tax credits they didn't know existed. When the Patel family needed emergency funds for their daughter's surgery, Paul personally delivered a check from an old account they'd forgotten about. He wasn't just their accountant. He was their guardian. By 2015, Paul managed 432 accounts. Still in the same small office, still driving a 15-year-old sedan, his wife Emma would laugh. "Paul, you could retire? We could travel." But Paul couldn't stop. Because for him, this wasn't about money. It was about that promise. That 2 a.m. promise to a drunk man he'd never forget. Then came Marcus Webb. Marcus showed up at a Chamber of Commerce meeting in April 2015. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive smile. He talked about private lending networks, about cutting out the middleman banks, about returns that made traditional investments look like children's allowances. 20% returns, every quarter, guaranteed. Paul listened politely, dismissed it. Ponzi scheme red flags everywhere. But Marcus was persistent. He invited Paul to lunch, showed him documentation, real businesses, real loans, real returns being paid to real investors. "I've been doing this for 8 years, Marcus said, sliding a portfolio across the table. "Not one investor has lost money, not one." Paul investigated. 3 weeks of research, the businesses existed, the loans were real. The investors he contacted were ecstatic. One woman said she'd tripled her retirement in 2 years. Another man said he'd paid off his house entirely from the returns. Paul ran the numbers 17 different ways. It was aggressive, yes, but it wasn't illegal. It wasn't fraudulent. So in June 2015, Paul invested $10,000 of his personal savings. And if you're watching this thinking you know where this goes, wait, because you don't. 3 months later, Paul received his first return. $2,000, 20%. Exactly as promised, he reinvested it. 3 months after that, another return, then another. By spring 2016, Paul's initial investment had grown to $37,000. Emma was shocked. "Paul, this is incredible. You should tell your clients." But Paul hesitated. "I need to see it last a full cycle, 5 years minimum. I won't recommend anything I haven't tested." But here's what Paul didn't see coming. Here's the twist nobody talks about in these stories. The returns kept coming because Paul kept watching. Every quarter, like clockwork. And every quarter, Paul's confidence grew. By 2017, he was certain. This wasn't a scheme, this was legitimate. This was the opportunity his clients deserved. So he started slowly. 5 clients, small amounts, $10,000 each, conservative entries. He explained every risk, documented every conversation, made them sign acknowledgement forms. This was careful. This was responsible. And it worked beautifully. Those 5 clients saw returns that made them cry. Mrs. Chen called Paul at midnight, sobbing with joy. "I can finally take my grandson to Japan," she said. "I never thought I'd have enough." Mr. Johnson hugged Paul outside the grocery store. "You changed my life," he whispered. Paul went home that night and told Emma, "I think I finally found a way to give them what they deserve." By 2018, word spread. Clients were begging Paul to get them in. "Please, Paul, you've never steered us wrong." He expanded carefully. 50 clients, then 100, then more. He kept meticulous records, every investment tracked, every return documented. Paul wasn't stealing. He was building the legacy he'd promised that drunk man in the gas station 30 years ago. But in March 2019, the quarterly payment was late. Paul called Marcus. No answer. Called again, voicemail. Again. Nothing. Paul drove to Marcus's office. Empty. The building manager said Marcus hadn't been there in 6 weeks. Paul's stomach turned. He called the investment company directly, disconnected number. He searched online, the website was gone. And then Paul did what changed everything. He checked the business registrations, the loans, the underlying assets. They didn't exist. They'd never existed. The businesses were shell companies. The loans were fabrications. The returns Paul had been receiving for 4 years weren't profits. They were his own money and other investors' money being recycled back to him. Marcus hadn't been running a lending network. He'd been running the most sophisticated Ponzi scheme Paul had ever seen. And Paul, the man who'd built his entire reputation on protecting people, had funneled 318 of his clients into it. $8.4 million. Gone. Paul didn't sleep that night or the next. He sat in his office, running calculations, trying to find a way out. Maybe he could move money between accounts, cover the losses temporarily, buy time until he found Marcus, made him pay, made this right. So Paul started shifting funds, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, creating fake statements, telling clients their accounts were fine, just temporary processing delays, nothing to worry about. But if you're thinking this is where Paul became the villain, you're still not seeing it. Because 3 weeks later, Paul received a call from Marcus, from prison. Marcus had been arrested in the Cayman Islands trying to flee to Venezuela, and he told Paul something that broke him completely. Paul, you were never supposed to be part of this. I tried to keep you out, but you kept pushing, kept investigating, kept bringing more people in. You legitimized me. Your reputation made other investors trust me. You weren't my victim, Paul. You were my best salesman. Paul hung up and vomited in his office trash can. The auditors came in July. Paul confessed immediately. Every detail, every transfer, every fake statement. He didn't hide, didn't run. He sat in that interrogation room and told them everything because he believed if he was honest, if he cooperated, maybe they could recover something. Maybe his clients could get something back. They recovered 17%. Mrs. Chen lost her Japan trip, her grandson's college fund, her house. Mr. Johnson lost everything he'd rebuilt after the fire. The Patels lost the money they'd saved for their second daughter's wedding. 432 families destroyed by the man they trusted most. Paul's trial lasted 3 weeks. His lawyer argued Paul was a victim too, that he'd been deceived, that he'd never intended to harm anyone. The prosecutor brought Mrs. Chen to the stand. She was 81 years old. She looked at Paul and said 5 words. You knew. You always knew. Paul wanted to scream that he didn't, that he'd been fooled too. But in that moment, he realized something horrible. She was right. Deep down in the part of himself he'd been ignoring, he'd known those returns were too good. He'd known the documentation was too perfect. He'd known, and he'd chosen to believe anyway, because he wanted to be the hero. He wanted to be the man who changed lives, and he destroyed them instead. The judge sentenced Paul to 20 years. Emma divorced him before the appeals process finished. His parents both died within 8 months, his father of a heart attack, his mother in her sleep. Paul sometimes wonders if shame can kill you, if trust broken can stop a heart. He's in year 6 now, Federal Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. He teaches other inmates basic accounting, helps them file their taxes, manages the prison library budget. And every single day, he thinks about that promise he made to Mr. Raymond, that drunk man crying in a gas station at 2 a.m. Paul kept that promise for 30 years and broke it in 4. But here's what stays with me. What keeps me awake? Paul Denton wasn't a monster. He wasn't a sociopath. He was a true believer who convinced himself that the impossible was possible because he wanted so desperately to give people more than they had. And maybe that's the scariest part. Because Paul's story isn't about a villain. It's about a hero who became the villain the moment he stopped questioning his own certainty. 3 months ago, Paul received a letter from Mrs. Chen's grandson. He's 24 now. He wrote, "My grandmother died last year. She never stopped talking about you. Not with hate, with confusion. She said she wished she could understand how you could do it. I'm writing because I think I finally understand. You didn't steal our dreams. You stole your own first. And that's somehow sadder. Paul keeps that letter in his cell, reads it every night before he sleeps, because it's the only thing that makes him feel like maybe, someday, someone might understand that he didn't wake up one morning and decide to become the accountant who stole dreams. He became it slowly, one justified decision at a time, one ignored red flag at a time, one moment of wanting to believe at a time. And if you think you could never be Paul Denton, ask yourself this. When was the last time you wanted something so badly you ignored the warning signs? When was the last time you trusted something because you needed it to be true? When was the last time you convinced yourself the impossible was possible because the alternative was too painful to accept? We all have a little bit of Paul Denton in us. The difference is, most of us never get tested. Most of us never have 432 people trusting us with their futures. Most of us never have to learn the hardest lesson Paul learned. That good intentions don't protect anyone. That trust is earned in decades and destroyed in moments. That the road to hell isn't paved with evil. It's paved with people who believed they were doing the right thing. This was the accountant who stole dreams. And the most terrifying part, he's still trying to wake up. If you love Paul's story, subscribe and share your experience with us in the comment section.